Meeting of the West Devon Borough Council Overview and Scrutiny meeting. So we'll start off with apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Saxby, Councillor Squire and Councillor Casbolt, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other apologies? Confirmation of minutes. I hope you've all read those. You happy with them? Yeah. Do you want to raise your hands if you're happy? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Jane.
That's right. So this is really pedantic of me, but it was just, we had a really lovely discussion last time about lots of different data, and there's a brief mention of that. But then it also just says that we resolved to look at the key performance indicators more regularly, and I just think it would be great to have a little bit more clarity about what that means, because as someone who's new, it's not clear what more regularly means. So whether it's we're resolving to look at them quarterly or 6 monthly, I just think a little bit more clarity would be great.
Should we ask Councillor Edmonds what that means? Councillor Edmonds, would you like to comment? Sorry to surprise you.
Yeah, it was a very lengthy discussion, as I recall. We've captured all of that. I'm sorry if it's not in the minutes, but I know Mr. Hawke has captured all that. We've reviewed that information a couple of days after the meeting, and Mr. Hawke is now building that into the key performance indicators and the reporting process that will come forward, I think, probably in December. So it's all been captured, even though it may not be fully reflected in the minutes. But I don't know if you want to just embellish the minute, just to, expand the minute to cover off that.
So that's great to know that that was captured. It was more just the point. It just says that we'll be looking at them more frequently. So I just think that's very imprecise.
We've
so
changed
if we can say how often.
The data as well. Some of the data, some of the points that were raised have been taken on board and will be reflected in the next run of data. That helps. I'm trying to think of the actual KPIs, but I can't quite. Homelessness was one, probably, I think, where we've added to the data.
Mr. Brooke.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd just like to add to Councillor Evans' point, which is that when the corporate strategy comes to Hub, which it's doing, if not in November, following meeting, forgive me for not quite knowing, the KPIs that get built into the delivery plan get reported through Hub on a rolling basis by theme. So there's virtually one every meeting. So I think regularly probably is reflected in that process, if that helps.
You happy with that? Any other comments on the minutes of the last meeting? Got a show of hands to say we're happy? Thank you very much. So we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please?
I'm just going to declare an other registrable interest because I'm employed by Citizens Advice towards North, Mid and West Devon. I'm going to leave the meeting while that presentation takes place.
Thank you very much. Are there any more? Okay. So items requiring urgent attention, I don't think we have any. And no issues have been raised for the public forum. So we can move swiftly on to the presentation by Citizens Advice. So we have Vicky Rowe. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hopefully you can all hear me okay. So thank you. Is that okay? Can everyone hear me? Yeah, lovely. So thank you for inviting me to come along to your meeting today to talk about the work that we do. So yes, I'm Vicky Rowe, I'm the Chief Exec of Citizens Advice, and we cover 4 local authority areas in Devon, your local authority area, plus Mid Devon and North Devon and Torridge. We're quite big for a Citizens Advice. Most of them in the country tend to cover one local authority area. So we are part of the National Citizens Advice, so we're a member of National Citizens Advice, but we are an independent charity, so the income that we generate is purely our own. We don't receive any funding from the national body at all. But we benefit from, well, we're almost like a franchise, I would say. So we benefit from branding, insurance, trusted brand, and also we are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority and through the Advice Quality Standards Agency, and we have that through our national membership with Citizens Advice and the auditing processes that occur within that. So I think you probably all know what we do for a living. We are an advice charity, so we provide advice and information to people that need us in the community on their rights and responsibilities. And I'll talk in more detail as we go through the slides about what that looks like for people in Mid-Devon. Of course, we receive funding from yourselves and Devon County Council and the town councils and parishes, as well as our specialist services projects as well, which I'll talk about as we go through. Thanks, Kathy. So the data that I'm going to share with you, first of all, is for the last full financial year, so 22-23. So in West Devon, we helped 2,857 people with 6,573 problems. And we will talk a little bit more about people's problems, because what we're finding is that they are becoming more complex and more time-consuming to work through people's problems. So the work that we did last year for West Devon generated £1.3 million back into the local economy for households, and the majority of that would be in welfare benefits. So talking to people about what they can claim and supporting them in putting their claims through. And the last bit of data on this slide is the work that we've completed so far for the first 6 months of this financial year. We will issue our impact reports to the 4 local authorities that we work with in the next couple of weeks. So I'm sure that Neil will share that with you when it comes out. But hot off the press, the figures are looking very similar to same period last year. So 1,375 people with nearly 4,000 problems and an income generation of nearly £700,000. Thank you. Okay, so just a little bit more detail on those comparisons. So the numbers of people that we've helped are 4% down so far to the same period last year. But as I mentioned, people's problems are becoming more complex, and people are presenting with more problems than they were before. So you can see from the data there's been an increase of 21% in the issues, or we call them issues, but problems that people are facing. And also you'll see from the income generation for the same period of last year that we are slightly higher, or quite significantly higher. We are already at £700,000 income generated for your local authority area so far. Thank you. Okay, so just again in comparison, I'm just going to quickly go past this slide because it's the same data in a different format really. It's just showing month by month the comparison in number of people that we've helped. But more significantly, if we go on to the next slide, you'll see the increase in the problems. So that's continued, other than the month of August, that's continued month on month. And really that's because people are, as we're all aware, struggling more through the cost of living crisis, and as all of the support that was put in place through the pandemic has kind of gradually stopped, people are now having to face those costs and reaching crisis points. So that's a trend that we are anticipating will continue for the remaining part of this financial year. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, and income that's coming back into the economy. So again, another table of showing that. So at the moment it's £700,000. So if we carry on in the same vein, then it's going to be at least 1.4 million of income gain back into your economy, into your local economy. So the interesting bit. So what are people coming to see us about in West Devon? So This is specifically for West Devon, but what I would say is it's the same for all 4 local authority areas that we work within. It's also the same across the Citizens Advice Network and across the entire country. So most of the work that we do is around welfare benefits. So that will be universal credit and any other welfare benefits that people are entitled to claim. And we'll come on to a bit more about what that looks like for us, but it's well in excess of 60–70% of the work that we're doing with people at the moment. Second biggest problem is utilities, and that's linked to fuel debt. Third biggest problem is debt overall, then we have housing, and then the last one is charitable support, which is actually mostly food banks, but there's a little bit of local charity support grants in there as well. So let's look a little bit more in detail at the welfare benefits, given that it's the biggest area. So personal independence payment and initial universal credit claim. So universal credit rollout is happening from, I think, from January, which means that everybody that's on a legacy welfare benefit will go on to universal credit, so we're expecting to see an increase in the demand for support there. But currently, personal independence payment, we're doing more of that than we are universal credit. General benefit entitlement is there as well, so as people go through different stages of their life, or whether they're in temporary employment, or even if they're working 2 jobs on 0 hours contracts and need a top-up, that's all the sort of thing that we would be giving advice on. This is disability living allowance and limited capability for work elements of universal credit as well is something that we're working with. Thank you. So the next biggest area is around fuel debt. So this is fuel vouchers predominantly. So we received some funding from Devon County Council or Citizens Advice across Devon have received a significant amount of funding from Devon County Council to issue their fuel vouchers. So we do a lot of that, as well as working with the local authorities to issue any local financial schemes that you have in place. Priority service register, so supporting people to become registered, and also the warm home discount, smart meter awareness, so we're doing a lot of work around that, and helping people to look and understand what their tariff is, what the price of the tariff is, and switching where they're able to do so. Thank you. So main debt problems. So again, you probably won't be surprised to read that council tax arrears is up there. It's the highest area that we are currently working with people in West Devon on around debt, and of course we talk to them about it being a priority debt and work very closely with your team here to try to renegotiate or reschedule those payments and recover your council tax arrears. Fuel debts overall are the second biggest area. Credit and store cards are becoming increasingly a problem for us because what we feel is that people used their access credit through the pandemic and to support cost of living increases, and they now have to pay that back. The same with catalogue and mail order debts. And then we have also maintenance and child maintenance arrears, advice and information being given out as well. And then finally, but by no least any less concerning, we have a lot of housing issues going on, a lot of people coming to us for advice around housing problems. So the main one being private sector rented property. And again, this is all information specific to West Devon. Environmental and neighbour issues, threatened homelessness, actual homelessness, and housing accommodation, so state of property. And then on to food banks. Well, I probably don't need to explain that really to you. We all know why people are turning more to food banks. We are now have a paid partnership with Trussell Trust, and I appreciate that not all of the food banks in West Devon are run by the Trussell Trust, but for those that are, we have paid member staff sitting in the Trussell Trust Food Bank to provide advice to people directly when they come in for a food voucher or when we're issuing a food voucher for them as well. Application for charitable support, so that could be grants, locally provided trust grants or national grants. A good example of that is the Macmillan grant application, which is the third biggest area. So anybody that we help that has cancer or other life-limiting illnesses would possibly be eligible for a Macmillan grant. So, and then other support in hand, such as clothes and explaining to people where they can go and get that support. So it's, again, a big area for us currently. Thank you. So I just wanted to say a little bit about volunteering in Citizens Advice before we move on to our specialist projects. So I think last year I came and spoke with you and talked to you about our volunteers and what had happened during the pandemic. So before the pandemic, we had 150 volunteers across our 4 local authority areas. And when the pandemic hit, we went down to 60. And it was because most of them took a step back and then felt like they didn't want to retrain back. And also, most of our volunteers at that point wanted to provide face-to-face advice, and we just weren't able to do it. So we've been working really hard over the last few years to build those numbers back up again. We've now got 83 volunteers at last count, of 17 of which are in the West Devon area. But we could really do with some support from you through your networking to get some more volunteers, because our volunteers really are they do 50% of our advice giving, basically. So the more of them we have, the more we are able to provide advice. So the roles of our volunteers it's not just giving advice. We also have volunteers who do admin, research and campaigns, which is our policy work. And also we're looking for trustees. So anybody in the room or anybody that you know that might be interested in becoming a trustee, we're looking for, specifically in West Devon, a new trustee as well. So our partnerships, so as well as the generous funding that we have from yourselves and Devon County Council that we call what we would call our core funding, so in a grant form, we also have an income strategy, a spectrum of different income sources that we apply for to deliver specialist projects, and some of those are listed on, the bigger ones are listed there on the presentation for you. So Trussell Trust, as I've mentioned, the Big Lottery, National Grid, Macmillan, Health Watch, Action for Children, Quids for Kids, Young Carers. These are all specialist projects so that anybody that comes to us from any of the 4 local authority areas will have access into these specialist projects, all with paid advisors sitting behind the scenes giving advice for those specific cohorts of people. Thank you. So research and campaigns, so our policy work is the second part of what we do. As well as giving advice and information, we also collate this data of where we think things are going wrong in society. And I always go back to the case of universal credit, where we were able to speak directly to the government to say, actually, it's not working, so we need to do something else. So it's still not working, but actually we're in a better position now than we were initially. So we collate quite a lot of data, and we presentations to yourselves as members of local authority, straight to MPs, and National Citizens Advice discuss this data directly with the government, so central government. So most of the, it's not a great chart, sorry, but most of the evidence that we're gathering is around welfare benefits, housing. It's just, the same as you would see for our advice giving. Interestingly, we've got some hate crime stuff coming through as well. So we've recently become a hate crime centre, reporting centre for Citizens Advice. So we're starting to encourage people that come to see us for advice to report hate crime if they've experienced it. So there's some ward data there. Kathy has this on the presentation for you if you want to understand anything a little bit more in detail for your own wards as members. We can provide that information for you, but I just thought it was useful to put a bit of local information there for you to see what's happening in your wards. Okay, thank you. Before I go on to satisfaction in West Devon, I just wanted to say that actually when we come out to present, we always show what I believe is a good impact and good value for money for your contribution to our service. But what's realistic and what I need to share with you is that even though we're helping all of those people, we're only actually currently helping about 20% of the people that need our help. So in the access routes that we can measure, so predominantly telephone, web chat and email advice, we are picking up 20% of calls, emails and web chats. It's much harder for us to measure face-to-face. We do deliver about 20% of our service now is actually face-to-face. It's much harder for us to measure those that we didn't capture or those that we had to turn away. So we still have a significant problem around unmet demand, and we're not anticipating that that's going to go away anytime soon. We continue to do what we can in terms of income generation and also volunteer recruitment. And we have grown as an organisation quite significantly since the pandemic. We now have over 40 paid staff and 83 volunteers, and we'll continue to do that. But we also need local support from yourselves as well in enabling that to happen. So it's a good news story, but lots of unmet demand still out there. So just a bit about client satisfaction. So when people do get through, then they do receive a really good service. So 85% of the people that we help would recommend us, and 84% said that we help them to find a way forward. And so 82% said that they couldn't have moved forward without our support. And 65% said that they felt less stressed and anxious, which is a significant amount of people. And interestingly, 42% said that they've had an improvement in their physical health as well. So we know that when we do sit down with people and give them advice, we are supporting them both financially and in their well-being. But I can't stress enough how much unmet demand there is still out there for services such as citizens' advice. And lastly, just to give you some information about access into the service. So we look at this all of the time. It is our intention to open our doors as much as possible for face-to-face appointments. We have the details there of when we're open. What I would say is if you are talking to anybody, any members of the public, it's best to look on the website because it does change. We're trying to increase our opening hours, or open door hours, I should say, all of the time. But the advice line, which is a free telephone number, that's open 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And also we have an email access in now as well. So we're again looking at all of the different access routes into the service. Okay, so that's the presentation from me. So I'll open it up to any questions that anybody has.
Thank you very much. We also have Councillor Leach online, who is the lead member for this area of work. So do we have any questions, please?
Yes, bring it a bit closer. It's interesting that the universal credit benefit is the largest sort of inquiry. Is that because people have not had the satisfaction of getting that information directly from the authorities?
Sorry. Universal credit is a complex process to sign up to and to get right. And a lot of people struggle with it, so they come to us for help in doing that. And also when people are claiming, and then if their situation changes, that can be difficult for them to understand what that means for their payments. So we support people with that.
Okay, so does that mean that the system that we have for people applying to that is far too complicated for them to understand?
When you say we, do you mean central government?
Yeah,
well, yes. We would say so, yes. Still difficult, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Elliott.
So thank you, because that was really interesting. So I had a couple of questions. So one was whether you've got information about the sort of age profile of the people that you're helping, and also presumably when you talk about numbers of people, it actually could be more than that indirectly that you're helping, because there's the other household members. So sort of linked to that, do you know how many children? Do you sort of get information about the household size or composition? And then it would be lovely to hear a little bit more about the unmet demand because there's sort of like two sorts of unmet demand, aren't there? There's sort of people who are trying to get through on the phone and don't get through, but then there's also people who sort of don't even know that you're there, and clearly you can't know the unknown unknowns, but any more you could say about that would be really interesting. Thank you.
First of all, yeah, so we specifically say income into households, because you're right, we will support the person that's in front of us, but sometimes that does expand out to be other family members. So they will be classified as individual clients, so individual people helped. So it often does extend into household rather than just the individual person. We do create some profiling around households and tenure and numbers. We tend not to share it. We use it sometimes for funding applications. You asked me another question on profiling. Oh, it was age profiling. So yes, we do have that, and I believe it comes in you'll receive that information in our 6-month report to you, which is imminent. So that will have age profiling in there. And unmet demand, yeah. So a lot of people still don't know that we're available, and some that do can't get hold of us. So we talk quite a little bit about external comms and promotion of our service. So for some of our paid projects, such as the energy, fuel vouchers, we want to actively promote those because we have specific resource to deal with the demand should it come or when it comes or as it increases through the winter. And that's because we're in a paid project with Devon County Council or the energy companies. So we can scale that up and down. So we will be promoting that through socials and through other things. But our general core service, we can't promote it because we don't have the resource to support it. So it's a difficult one.
Councillor West.
Thank you.
Hi.
And thank you again for a really detailed report. It's really good to see. But inevitably, we always like to drill down a bit more if we can, don't we? It's one of these data and everything else like that.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, specifically around PIP. Because
Yeah.
in fact, PIP was your largest one.
Yeah.
Having experienced it for the case of my own son, do you signpost or cooperate with other charities that are maybe in a better position to actually help people with PIP than yourselves?
I don't know of any that would be better positioned to help people.
Well, Improving Lives in Plymouth is one example. Now, I appreciate that's within Plymouth, but that
Yeah.
charity has links across the.
So we work very closely with lots of different organisations across Torridge, North and Midwest Devon. And if we were A, not the specialist, or B, don't have the capacity to deal with that, with the demand, we would try to support people in finding other organisations that do. But in the case of PIP applications, we would consider ourselves to be the experts in it. So we would be trying to do that work ourselves. If people come to us, when they get through to us, so the 1 in 5 that's fortunate enough to come through to us, we would then provide that information and that advice to them. If it's specifically working with children, then we have a paid project with Devon County Council called Quids for Kids. So there would be a paid member of staff to support.
In this instance, it wasn't. It was adult care, and this was about 4 or 5 years ago. So expertise at school may have improved within it. Having gone through the 2 routes,
Yeah.
the other charity I mentioned seemed much more able to tailor it to the needs of our particular family. So I can't talk for everybody, obviously.
Well, that's
it depends
great.
on. Because it was around autism as opposed to physical needs, it was
Sure.
more emotional
Yeah.
needs.
So
So
the
they were
quids-
specialists within that area for
Yeah.
autistic people. And I just
Yeah,
wondered
so the
if...
Quids for Kids project would do that, but again, it's inundated. There's not enough funding to support the level of demand specifically for autism or Asperger's spectrum applications for PIP.
Hence, I would suggest that there may be work to be done around actually talking to other charities which specialise in areas potentially in terms of that signposting.
Yeah, so we're talking to Devon County Council about the funding around that as well and which other partners they so, but yes, there will be other agencies that do it, and great if they can specialise. So with PIP applications, what we also do is appealing at tribunals, and we have a 95% success rate in overturning declined or failed applications, which is the sort of meaty piece of work that we get involved with, which is a huge social policy problem in that most of those applications should have been approved at first medical assessment, and we all know that they're not, and they go through mandatory, they then go to appeal, and a year later they get turned around, and then families get that funding, albeit a year too late, and there's probably been there has been a huge cost associated with that whole process.
I mean, the good thing is they will backdate to the original appeal, which is great, but if you're still waiting for that money, it's great getting in a lump sum, but what goes on before that in terms of some of the stresses on the families, it is quite difficult.
Absolutely, it's difficult, yeah.
My other question relates to, I was just interested to see, being a Borough Tour ward member, I was interested to see the number from Borough Tour that came forward. It seemed quite high. Is that, do you think, a reflection, A, of the size of population, and also B, is it that people within Borough Tour, I noticed Buckland was higher than Borough Tour, are more likely to come forward and seek advice, perhaps, compared to some areas?
I wouldn't know. We wouldn't drill down to that kind of analysis of the data, really, as to whether a particular parish would be more likely to come and find us than another. What I can say, though, is if you do want more information specifically around your borough, we can give that to you, but it will look very similar to the overall data. Whenever we cut the data, it's the same problems that people are presented with. We talk quite a lot about data for funding applications and for evidence. When we write our reports out to stakeholders such as yourselves, we want to present you something that you can read and enjoy reading, that isn't sort of too detailed. And imagine if we kind of borough level with that detail. But if there's something specifically you want to know about your borough, if you're particularly interested in data, we can find that for you. Maybe just once, though.
Thank you. Chair, can I just, out of interest, in terms of, I do have an interest in autism within my family, and I do wonder in terms of the lack of effort, shall we say, from Devon as County Council in terms of autism. Waiting lists are increasing for people to be actually diagnosed with autism, and that it is something that is an area I think we need to look at the Borough Council in terms of support for autistic families, because the impact of autism on families is huge and totally underestimated in some respects. Because of the lack of diagnosis, it means then they can't go forward to PIP, because that's one of the biggest things to help with that.
Yeah, perhaps we could look at that when we come to the work programme. Yeah,
thank you.
That'd be good. Councillor Southcott.
My question was, do you break down the wards into the parishes? Because I represent Bridgestowe ward, which is 10 parishes. I'd like to know a bit more about which areas of the ward is actually having problems.
We could do. Yeah. We have one person that does all of our data, so for us it's about what's priority and what's going to keep the funding coming in, and what's the purpose behind it. So my question would be, yes, we probably could find that for you, but what would you do with it?
Basically, it's a question that comes up at every parish council meeting. Is there the need in our parish?
Yeah, sure.
Should they then look at what they've got to spend?
Yeah.
Whether they can afford to fund you at all?
Okay, so related to that then is that we will write to every single parish council, and within that letter will be how many people in those parishes or that parish that we've helped in the last year. You will get that.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Could you talk to us a bit more about the issues of rurality? Obviously, people can't travel as easily, and you're spread out a long way across a massive area.
Yeah.
So what particular problem does that cause?
Well, I mean, it's obvious ones, isn't it? It's access in. But one of the things the pandemic has done for all organisations is to allow us to reconsider the face-to-face service and other access routes into our services. I know, as local authority, you had to have the same conversations. So 80% of the work we do now is via telephone or email or video meetings with clients, which is a new thing that we're just piloting, and that seems to work really well. So that does, that helps in terms of the royalty and people being able to get access to the service without leaving their homes, basically. And also from an accessibility perspective, it's good as well. Actually coming in and finding us in the offices, yes, it's a problem. We know that. Our target is to support 80% of people online and 20% face-to-face, and we try to retain that 20% of resource then for the most vulnerable in society. So we usually try to determine whether or not we'll give somebody a face-to-face appointment depending on what the problem is and who they are. It doesn't always work exactly like that. But also sometimes it's to do with funding. So we're very lucky here that Oakhampton United Charities in Oakhampton provide us with some money as well. And we're able to open an extra day in the Ockman Centre just because of that funding. So if you live in Oakhampton, you're more likely to get a face-to-face appointment than if you live in Tavistock. So it's a little bit to do with funding as well.
Are there any other? Sorry, Mandy, I didn't see you back there. Welcome. You have a question?
Hi, Vicky. Long time no see. I thought Tavistock Council still gave you money every year. Oh, right. It's all right. You haven't mentioned it. When you mentioned Oakhampton, you know, I thought, and I know theirs comes from United Charities, but I know we still do, and you're probably busy filling in your form for the coming year as we speak.
Very much. I have another question. Sorry, there's lots of questions. Councillor Renders.
Sorry. Yes, it was just obviously with the amount of information that you're collating on behalf of the residents of West Devon, my question relates to, given the information that you have, how much national lobbying do you do on behalf of residents? I'm thinking particularly housing income support and how people are struggling if those figures don't meet, given the cost of living crisis we've got at the minute. So it was really one to do with lobbying. I just wondered how involved you got, seeing as you're there with the core of all the information from first hand, rather than us just, you know.
Remember to do that, so my apologies. All of the information that we gather and record goes to National Citizens Advice, as well as we can lobby locally if we want to. And National Citizens Advice meet with central government, I think it's at least quarterly, to talk about those main issues. So yeah, it's going directly back to central government. And sometimes Citizens Advice nationally ask us to look for evidence to back up something that they're already working on, or sometimes they just look at all of the evidence that's being gathered across the network and use that to lobby for change.
Councillor West? Did you have another question?
I'm interested and also disturbed by the fact the increase in hate crime you've mentioned. I would have thought the first port of call for most people on that would be the police. So can you just briefly give us an idea of what sort of conversations you're having with these people?
Yeah, so conversations, no, I can't, and I wouldn't know them. But it's unreported hate crime, so it's unreported to the police hate crime. So we're just the police crime commission's interested to understand unreported crime data, and Citizens Advice across the country, as well as other organisations, I understand, are able to become a reporting centre, and we have a specific login portal that we provide information based on what people tell us about the crimes that they've experienced.
Are there any more questions? You were asking us to use our network to encourage volunteers to come forward. So it'd be nice if all councillors knew about that. So I was wondering if we could add that to the weekly bulletin. Do you think that'd be possible? Yeah, and that's in all areas, I guess.
Specifically in West Devon, it would be great to get some more volunteers. Yeah.
I think we finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's really nice to hear more about it. We really appreciate it. It's a very important service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would somebody like to Find Councillor Mann and bring her back again. Thank you. Hope you have a good journey home. Okay, so moving on to item 7, which is social housing standards, homelessness, temporary accommodation and rurality, which is a verbal update from Ms Blake and Councillor Renders. Thank you very much.
Afternoon, everybody. Obviously, this is following on from your previous meeting and the questions that came about following the KPI report. So we thought it'd be nice if we give you a little bit of a background or a little bit of an overview, if Mrs. Blake will do that, and then we can take some extra questions. Hopefully, she'll cover a lot of it, given that you've read it all already, haven't you? I'll pass you over.
Thank you, Councillor Renders. Yes, I understand the interest was particularly around the key performance indicators, which are for your suite of indicators for my service area are around numbers in temporary accommodation and numbers where homelessness is prevented. So just to give you an overview of the kind of snapshot as it is currently, West Devon currently has 16 households in temporary accommodation. We've got 6 families and 10 singles, single people, of which 4 of them are care leavers. We have 7 households in self-catering accommodation, including, and those are made up of 5 families, and 9 households in bed and breakfast accommodation. West Devon has the lowest numbers in temporary accommodation in Devon. That's something we're particularly proud of, but we know there's a lot more work to do to try and prevent the homelessness and people needing to go into temporary accommodation wherever possible. The cost of temporary accommodation for last year was in total 329,000, and the cost to West Devon was 247,000 of that, so that is a significant expenditure. It's likely to be more in 23-24. That increase is based on the number of nights people are spending in temporary accommodation, and an increase in the cost per night. We used to see some seasonal change in the cost of temporary accommodation. However, with the cost of living and higher increases out of seasonal time, we aren't seeing those reductions. We have a lack of move-on options for anybody with any additional or complex needs. Accessing any kind of supported accommodation is very challenging in rural areas. We also don't have many one-bedroom properties and larger accommodation, 4-bed plus, coming forward in the district. So we are dealing with this by using our housing register to specifically advertise properties to people who the council has got accepted duty to, and wherever possible we're procuring cheaper accommodation options. We've also successfully purchased 5 properties through the local authority housing fund, and we received permission from the hub last month to purchase an additional 3 of those properties, which will be used in the first instance for our Afghan and Ukrainian refugees, and then for longer term for our own housing need. We're also working really closely with Devon County to look at holistic options for care leavers. In last year, 22-23, and I realise this is a lot of facts which I will make sure are attached to the minutes, West Devon accommodated 72 households, of which 53 were single people and 19 were families. That is a huge change in historically where most people that were accommodated by the borough were families, and that correlates with the lack of one-bed accommodation, the difficulties with local housing allowance, and the lack of one-beds becoming available. Overall, last year, there were 5,916 nights spent in temporary accommodation, and that was an increase from the year before of 2,440. Some of the reasons why we've seen this increase is the collapse of the private rented sector and less opportunity to prevent homelessness by supporting people to remain in their own homes. The recent increase in mortgage rates have meant that landlords are struggling to make ends meet and are deciding to leave the market completely. We are looking at, we've also got staff attached to temporary accommodation to support people move on and give them the hand-holding that they might need to be able to access accommodation independently. We also recently received planning permission on our own property at Plymouth Road, where we're hoping to make to make 3 flats for temporary accommodation use in that building. Over the last 3 years, we have prevented homelessness in 404 instances, and we have had 967 people present in the same time. We have a rough sleeper count of 0. We're about to do that's an annual estimate, which is done in November. So we're hopeful that we will remain with low instances. We offer no second night out to rough sleepers, which means that wherever possible, we will offer accommodation to a rough sleeper instead of them spending a night on the streets. You will remember from your KPIs that we were able to prevent homelessness in 60% of the cases that had approached us. That doesn't mean that the remaining 40% are just disappear and we don't support them. Where homelessness is prevented, it means we are able to avoid accepting a full duty by resolving the homelessness in some other way. That could be a new tenancy or either social housing or private rented. It could be mediation with the landlord or family for somebody to be able to remain. It is not people going into temporary accommodation. The two are completely independent from each other. If we identify that someone is threatened with homelessness and we accept a duty to prevent this, in 60% of those cases we are successful as per the KPI. The national average is around 40%, so we are performing well in positive outcomes for households. The remaining 40% are people where we aren't able to fix the problem before they leave their home, and we continue to work with them while they're homeless, often with a positive outcome. I've also got a quick update on Homes for Ukraine, which I understand was also of interest to the committee. So if I could go on with that. To date, we've welcomed 194 Ukrainian guests to West Devon as their first location, and a further 10 have moved into the area from a secondary location in the UK. And the guests have been supported by 92 different hosts. The bulk of the guests have arrived between April and August of last year, but we are still receiving guests, not nearly as many, but a couple of arrivals each month. And we have had, the actual case as it stands at the moment is the majority of guests have left their first sponsor, and we've got them into private rental properties. And over 20 families have also returned to Ukraine. We have only needed to use temporary accommodation on 4 occasions in this whole period, which is testament to the work of the hosts, the people of West Devon who are supporting these families, and some of the work of the resettlement team who work and are great at trouble spotting problems before they arise and work with people to mediate those situations so we can move people on before they require emergency accommodation. We will carry on working with them. The government need to give some security around what will happen after month 24, because after 2 years, the host receives no payment as it stands at the moment. So the thank you payment that they've been receiving for those 24 months will cease on when those people get to their 2 years. So at the moment we're seeking clarity about that, because some of those families will be the early part of next year. I realise that's a real whistle stop, and I've thrown lots and lots of facts at you, but I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be several questions. Can I just ask something I didn't understand? You said people are struggling to make ends meet and leaving the market completely. Is that people giving up on trying to get a mortgage and just looking for...
Sorry, Councillor Kimber. Yeah, it was really around the landlords are giving up. You know, that a lot of them are leaving the market because they can't get... there was some quite dramatic changes to the tax rules around being a private landlord. That, coupled with the rent increases, have meant that the mortgage increases have meant that many have just decided to not be a landlord anymore.
And increases in the cost.
Yeah, and to bring properties up to an EPCC or above, which I know there's been sort of a calming down of that situation, but that is been the world we've been working with, that landlords have been told that they need to get their properties up to a C or above.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, please? Councillor Elliott.
Yes, that was really helpful. Thank you. It's brilliant. So following up from Councillor Kimber's question, I'm guessing you don't have access to the sort of numbers of spaces that there are, because, you know, we can sort of perceive that landlords are leaving, but the question is, does that mean there's 10% fewer places for people to live, or 20%? So it'd be interesting to know that. And then I've got another question, which is something completely different. So perhaps you want to do that one.
Yeah, we're working with the University of Exeter and the Devon Housing Commission on really understanding some of these figures and the implications for the market across Devon. And I'm hoping once we've got a position, I can share that with members. And I mean, it will be public information. And we know, because of the lengths of people having to stay, you know, the increases with people having to stay in temporary accommodation, that there just is not the availability. We're given some data via Rightmove each month about properties that are within 5% of the local housing allowance, and often there are none available in the whole of West Devon. So we know, but actually have anecdotally, but having that report and the work done by the University of Exeter will be really useful.
I can have a completely different question. So I was trying to scribble down your figures. So as I understood it, you were saying last year there were 72 households that at some point over the year were in temporary accommodation. And you also gave a figure of 5,916 nights. I think that was also for last year. So, I mean, if it was just completely uniformly distributed, that's about 83 nights that each case is in temporary accommodation. And I just wonder if you can give any sort of flavour. Is that about right? Or is it that there are some people that are really just in temporary accommodation for a week or so, and others that are there for months? Because I think at a human level, we'd be really concerned about people who are long-term in temporary accommodation, because that's so sort of dehumanising and difficult for them. So anything on that would be really interesting.
We remain equally concerned, because there is legislation around 6 weeks for families in bed and breakfast. They cannot be in bed and breakfast accommodation for longer than 6 weeks. We haven't broken that law in West Devon, but we've come very close. And that is becoming increasingly challenging, and a number of local authorities across the country consistently will have no choice other than to break that rule. For single people with very complex and challenging needs, with perhaps poor tenancy history where they've been evicted before, they will be in temporary accommodation for longer, because they need a package of support which we need to build around them. They need a period of sustained accommodation, and even if that is temporary accommodation, that might be the change that makes them able to manage their tenancy better. larger families as well. Through Devon Home Choice, we have had no 4-bedroom properties in the past 12 months come up. And although families that large are rare, when one presents, it is very challenging to find them accommodation, and it has to be the private sector that delivers that. So there are outliers within that. I think it's fair to say, Councillor. And yeah, occasionally we get a really great story where somebody's only got to stay sort of a week because they've got a property ready to move into, and it's just a bit of a bridge. But there are times of longer than we would like in temporary accommodation.
Wood?
2 quick questions, hopefully. I was watching Spotlight, I think it was, or something like that, and they were talking to some homeless people up on Plymouth Hoe, and they were talking about how they're being encouraged from other areas of the country to come down to the southwest because of its wonderful climate and warm nights and all, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, do you find there's a seasonal trend within the homelessness? I mean, how often do you do the audit? Because if you do, say, in October or November, it could be the seasonal trend is that they've come along, enjoyed our wonderful weather down here and decided they're going to go off into the city or something like that. I mean, could you just explain that a little bit?
Yes, so rough sleepers, which I think is the type of homelessness you're alluding into there, Councillor, is you know, we know that there are people that we accommodate. We do there is a national 1-day estimate or audit once a year when we're required to give our figures back, and we use data from the police, from our people that work with us who are out early, the refuse collectors, some of our localities officers. So we use a range of intelligence, but we know that we get rough sleepers at times in the year, and I think I've got some figures over the... Yeah, rough sleepers that we've actually accommodated in temporary accommodation over the 22-23 was 3. So we did bring people in. It was 4 the year before and 3 the year before. So it's around that figure annually where people have had an instance of rough sleeping. Do I think people come here? I think there are multiple reasons why people go anywhere. You know, we have certain duties and responsibilities around people fleeing violence from another area. We have specific duties and powers around people with an armed forces background. And we try wherever possible to work with those people and where there is no reason for them not to return, to reconnect them back to where they can go and access the services they can there. So yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag really of all of those things.
That's great, thank you. And my second question, I was quite interested to see the balance of single people requiring accommodation to families. Is it a trend that we've got that it's shifting? It's more single people are out there in terms of families needing accommodation?
Yes, 50% of the housing register is 1-bed need. It is very difficult because of the way that the local housing allowances, the benefits are structured in the... If you are under 35, you are only entitled to a shared room in a house in multiple occupation, which don't exist in the multitudes in West Devon. So it's really challenging for single people or a divorced parent. Those are all also the issues. And more complexities around mental health, around drug and alcohol, around care leavers. We have a cohort of people who are not easy to house, and some of the support arrangements just don't exist in rural areas. So that's a further challenge, and we work closely with our county colleagues around that. But it is difficult to maintain those kinds of services for very vulnerable people in rural areas.
Thank you, that was excellent, thank you.
I ask a kind of off-topic question. So we often see people, we have people sofa surfing, and where we are, there's a lot of people living in the woods and things like that, and I guess that they often feel very vulnerable, but their support network is in the local community, so they're unlikely to want to go anywhere else. But I guess they're technically homeless, and we could suggest they rang the homelessness team.
Yeah, we have had a rough sleeper outreach officer for a couple of years now, and it is her job. So if you see anybody in your locality or somebody comes to you to say so-and-so sleeping in the woods, then they will go out and they will make contact, and they might not come in immediately, but we'll keep trying, and we will try and get them to come in, and we look at how we can support people. In COVID, we were really successful at getting people in and really changing some mindsets about how people felt about being inside. So yeah, we just keep. Today might not be the day, but they might come in another day. So we'll keep working with them, and the door is never shut.
So they don't have anything to fear, really?
Absolutely not.
No. So it sounds like you've had a big increase in the amount of work over the last few years. Has the size of the team increased? Have you got extra capacity?
So we have a shared service with South Hams, and we have a good team, we have a stable team, and we've been successful for a number of government grants where we've been able to look at recruitment to some of those. Some of those are temporary roles, so we will probably look at what we might be able to do in the future, look at using some of the rents from some of the properties about how we might be able to increase our staff. You are very fortunate with your housing advice team. They are a great team, and they work very, very hard for the people of this borough, and it's quite often a very difficult and challenging role. So, I'm very proud of them.
Well, we really appreciate what you do, and the interactions I've had have been amazing. Thank you. Councillor Mann?
Yeah, thanks. That's been really interesting. I have a question around when you actually accept housing applications, and because the figures of being the lowest number in temporary accommodation, I assume are also based on sort of how many people that you take in as having a duty to. And my question is just around when West Devon makes that decision. Is it at first point of contact when they say that they have been given a Section 21, or is it later on when they actually have been told that they have to leave and given a court eviction notice? At what point do we treat them within West Devon as in need of the duty?
So the legislation around it is very clear that actually if they present to us as homeless, that is their homeless presentation. So we start working with them under how we might prevent their homelessness, so along that duty. We don't owe them a temporary accommodation duty at that time. Some people we don't owe a temporary accommodation duty to at all, but we will always try and work with those people and because of the way, because we don't have a lot of stock, the earlier we can intervene, the better. So there is no hard and fast answer to your question, Councillor, but we will look at presentations as and when they come in, and the earlier we can intervene, the better.
So just on that then, within the figures that you gave, did you give a figure for the number that presented?
So in the last year, 22-23, we had 348 people who presented to us, and we took an application from 157 of those. 191 were just advice cases.
Were just advice cases?
Yeah. So they were able to resolve their own homelessness with a bit of advice from us.
Okay, so they aren't counted as a homeless person at that point. It's just something that, just from a clarity point of view, I just need to understand what that means. Is 348 people came to us for housing advice and thought they might become homeless, but only 150 of those were given an application that said that we believed that they were potentially homeless.
Yeah, we don't gatekeep as a service. We want to work with people as early as possible, but a lot of those will not need a full application. They will need some mediation. They will need some advice on claiming benefits. They will need some additional help with discretionary housing payments. So it will never be a homeless application because we're able to resolve it without going through picking up a legal duty to them.
Right. Okay, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've given us a great deal of information. I don't want to cause you any extra work, but could we have that in some type of written report? You seem to have lots of sheets of paper there, so that's fine by me, but I would like to read it again because there's a lot of information to take in and digest.
Absolutely, I will make sure that Kathy's got it as in a coherent format for you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Thank you for the verbal update.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay, we're nearly there. So we have South West Water and Fusion will be visiting this committee sometime over the next few months, and we want to, instead of just responding to their presentation on the day, we want to prepare some questions beforehand. So we're suggesting we put together 2 task and finish groups which can do a bit of research and find out more about the subject, and then prepare some questions which we can send to the people before they attend the meeting. Would that be okay? Does that make sense? So we're looking for 5 to 6 people in each group, perhaps a mixture of new members and old members. And I'm not talking about age. Yeah. Experienced. Well, I don't know, experienced, that's just as complicated. So we're looking for 2 groups, South West Water and Fusion. And it would be quite good if we could ask Councillor Daniels to come and chat to the Fusion group, because she was chair last time. But would you like to volunteer for one of those groups or express an interest, and we'll see how many we get? Councillor Guthrie?
Similarly, South West Water, very interested in that.
South West Water for me, I've got a meeting with them in the parish on the 30th of this month over an issue, so yes.
Well, you're all very keen. We're just going to carry on around the room, are we?
Water for me, because I don't know what fusion means.
Fusion is our leisure.
Oh, is it?
Sports facilities.
Sports facilities.
Yeah, in Tavistock and
Tavistock
Oakhampton.
and Oakhampton.
Oh, I don't mind either.
Okay, so you can do one. Okay, then. Anybody else want to volunteer for a group? We need some Fusion people. Councillor Johnson's Fusion. Councillor Vachon. Anybody else would like to join in? Councillor Mann?
Yeah, I'll join Fusion as well.
Yeah, that'd be great, because then we've got somebody from Oakhampton and somebody from Tavistock. Councillor? So we've got 5 people for South West Water. We could do with a couple more for Fusion, but we could have a word with the people who are not here, couldn't we? Yep.
Chair, is it worth just discussing the brief?
Yes, please do. Would you like to talk about that?
Would that be okay?
Yes, please.
Because I don't feel that this is, you have a need to go off and have hours and hours and hours of meetings. It really isn't that. And I would say, in the context of water, I think what would be really helpful is to helpfully put across some questions around areas in which we can help, where we have any influence, what we can do to support. There's very limited benefit in just bashing whoever comes here. There really is. I mean, we might all want to do that, and I'm probably on the same page, and we all want to be able to go and swim in our rivers and not get ill. But as a council, for example, we work with AOMBs, and they have a farming protected landscape scheme, and water quality is influenced very much in a rural setting by land management. So we have a hand in that. We have a UK SPF programme. So think broadly, and let's try and make it both challenging but also constructive, perhaps. UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So I guess it's not necessarily about being specific about the schemes we're doing, but more just trying to understand on if we were in the future to want to help, what would this is just my thoughts, okay, I'm just downloading. What could we do as a council, recognising we're a borough council, that might help them solve the problems that we all want them to solve, perhaps. And just with, can I come back? And just with Fusion, the box that we have to consider our questions in is within the contract, not understanding the wider landscape of leisure provision is interesting, but what would be really good is some inside information or some local intel around what's working well, what's working less well. Cleanliness always comes up. Every single pool will never be as clean as we want it for the rest of eternity. So I guess you'll want to raise it, but maybe not as the key pillar of our inquisition, because ultimately it's clean until someone goes and uses the change rooms, then it's not. And I'm not defending Fusion here, just aware of the issue. But outreach or supporting particular communities, that might be something you might be wanting to think about. We're in a long-term contract partnership with Fusion, so it's all about how we can work together to the benefit of them and to the benefit of our residents, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And our relationship with Fusion has been very constructive, I think, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah. So, Elliot?
So that was really helpful, but then that sort of leads me on to another question, which is there a way of having a very brief briefing about each of them? Because before we even think about the questions, because you've just mentioned Fusion and how long the contract is, but I don't know how to look that up quickly, and it would be, nothing sort of extensive, but it would be great if the officers could provide a little bit of background.
Would it be helpful if I was just to attend? Promise me you won't do it at 9 at night, and we can have a 5-minute chat where I can just sort of set the scene. Or I can do it a different way. I'm just trying to think of the easiest way for you and me, I suppose, being truthful.
Well, you would attend the first meeting of each group.
Well, I don't know whether you're going to have more than one, but I'd happily come and sit in the room for a quarter of an hour and say, this is the situation. I don't know much about water, but I know a bit about Fusion.
Devon?
What date is South West Water coming in, please?
January 16th. Fusion is 13th of February. So that's great because we've got a bit of time, haven't we? We would want to get anything to them ahead of Christmas. So the chance of being able to attend the meeting is much higher.
And that's a full council.
That's for overview and scrutiny. They're coming here.
Great. So from my point of view, you can't really talk about water without talking about soil. So we could really do with having a really good understanding of how things work. So is that the point of our meeting before? I mean, not just soil, I mean, just generally to sort of get everyone up to speed on those things.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we don't really, there are very limited, there are some areas of overlap. I just think it'd be really helpful to understand from the perspective of South West Water how we can help. I don't know the answers. That's why I was thinking we'd phrase the questions in that way. I don't think the briefing's extensive because there's not a lot we do, but I'm happy to share what I know.
Councillor Mann?
Having looked at the minutes, I missed the introduction to overview and scrutiny, so I think I will definitely need some sort of briefing in order to understand what the focus of those questions is supposed to be on behalf of the council.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll send the very limited knowledge I have on South West Water and the areas of overlap for you to unpick and build on, and likewise Fusion ahead, and then you can digest it at your convenience. Maybe that's easier.
Councillor Leach.
If I may, on Fusion, I and others have quarterly meetings with Fusion. They only come to full council or to the committee rather once a year. I'm just wondering why we need yet another committee to look at Fusion. Why can't either myself or if you want to dedicate somebody else to come on to those meetings? who could then feed back to your committee.
Okay, as I understand it, I think it is so we can think about the questions we need to ask them, so before they arrive. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't join with the group. Is that what you're asking?
Not particularly. I meet up with you enough times now.
Okay, Mandy?
Just to let you know that I've got meetings with Fusion tomorrow. I'm spending the day with them and nipping to the after Goose Fair lunch. I've changed my visits round. But I'm meeting with John Parkinson, Lauren, can't think of her surname, and one of the new Fusion area managers. And we're actually going around both pools and facilities to see how they're being kept, new ideas and things like that. And I was at a Fusion event weekend before last. They'd asked me to go along to support them. So I'm happy to be as involved as I can be, but I can report in as well.
I think it's really reassuring that our leader and the lead member are well involved and in touch with that, but I think it would be really good if some members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee could get involved and we could learn more about the service, because a lot of our residents will use that service, so I think that would add to the feedback loop constructively. Is that okay? And then we'll all know what Fusion is, which will be great. Okay, so that's all clear. We'll hopefully give some guidance to get through that process. So I think the only thing we have to do now is look at the annual work programme, which we've just been looking at in any case. So I don't know if there's any comments on this. I think January, February and April are fairly full already. So are there any questions about the items to be scheduled or comments? Councillor Mann?
Yeah, again, this is just a question. I mean, today's, well, has been very light for me in particular, but that didn't seem like a very sort of intense meeting. And there's a lot of really good things on the list. And I wonder if there's any more space on those first, since we're going all the way to April, that's a whole year of this committee. And it seems like we haven't really had very many things come through. So I just wondered if there could be an additional agenda item on each one. And then we could take, you know, maybe the top three of the to be scheduled ones and put them up. It seems rather light, but maybe I don't know what those topics are. So I obviously haven't been on the committee before, so I'll leave that to you. It just strikes me that that's actually a schedule of a whole year's worth of activity already done.
So you're asking to do more work, basically? Yeah. Okay. We could probably accommodate that. Other people feel the same?
Yes, I just really second that, because for some of us, you know, we're travelling quite a distance to be here, and it's you know, we can have a full 2-hour meeting, and it would be really good to make sure that we have things in writing beforehand so that we can make best use of the time. I mean, the housing briefing was fascinating, but I think a lot of people, it would have been really good to at least have some of those figures in advance so that we, because I hadn't even noticed it was on the agenda because there was nothing apart from the item on the agenda. So let's really make the most use of this.
Councillor Viney?
Can I just respond to Jane in that I knew a lot of those figures because I'd been to the group meeting. What do you call the advisory meetings? The housing advisory, would that be? Yeah, so I'd just been to that as well. I'm not on that list, but I'm just trying to get my head around everything that's going on. And so that was just a way of getting prior knowledge of that stuff.
Councillor Ewings?
I can understand why the meetings have just got 2 more meaty items on them, because sometimes when we had 3, the meetings would go over 4 o'clock, because you want to be able to, on some of the items, it can get into quite a debate, and this is where you scrutinise down and take the deep dive and things like that, as they word it. So I think what you need to do, and this is down to the chair and the deputy chair with the lead officer, is if you're going to have 3, have an easy West Devon item. It's a trick around it. And then have your internal not internal, external speakers to give a bit more. I understand the comments that have been made about reports and things, but the speakers tend to give you nothing, so you come in cold. Whereas when you've got a West Devon internal item, apart from today, Mr. Brooks, people didn't seem to know about it, and it was a bit on the hoof. So normally you would have had that report in advance, so you can then scrutinise it and go through it from there. And I would hope that would be happening, Mr. Brooks.
Councillor Vachon?
Thank you, Chair. If you remember at the last meeting, we were looking at items to put on the list, and I suggested one on the antisocial behaviour and promoting the arts for younger people. On reflection and on comments made by Councillor Edmonds, so I really appreciate that, it would be better if that particular job goes to the advisory group for the particular lead in Hub. I've talked to yourself, obviously, Chair, and to the leader regarding this, and I think we're all in agreement that I'll pass all those details on for the antisocial behaviour and the arts project onto the Communities Hub leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on that? Councillor Vine?
I have no idea if this is the place all the time. I'm concerned about the lack of understanding from the whole council in the incredible role that the agricultural sector can play in across the board, but primarily climate change. And I mean, that's just a little thing that I've done today. There's that many things that join up that overlap across all the different things that we do, and they are all positive things. So how do I go about trying to help others understand, what an opportunity this is for West Devon?
Okay, so I think there's several of us have a very strong interest in agriculture, so I'd be keen to spend more time looking at this. So Councillor Guthrie's got something to say.
Chat. There's quite a good group of Devon farmers on Dartmoor anyway, the regenerative farming group, and I think it's about, it might be 20 or it might only be 12, I can't remember, but that's quite a strong group that's got a lot of science, worth in a way being active within that, and it's something obviously I could go along to, and if that was spread across West Devon, you'd have especially with the science up. If you look them up, I think you'll find that there's a big, there is a good group of regenerative farmers that are active, but they're looking to build that group. So it's something perhaps we could all help interact with and spread that around.
Yeah, Councillor Ewing, did you want to make a comment about that?
Yes. Just what Councillor Guthrie said. Is that the newsletter that was forwarded by Councillor Mott?
No, that's there was a good article in the Moorland a couple of months ago all about that farming group.
Yeah. Just to let you know, I've got the latest version of the corporate strategy. It's not ready for anything, but it does acknowledge agricultural modernisation and our farming community, and that is going to be put in, you know, as my introduction, and it is now going to go across, and without wishing to steal from the hub meeting that the strategy will go to, it's last time we had it in parallel, so and everything ended up in silo, nobody talked to each other. But this time with the groups, they're triangular and they can then go out and become part of another group. So you can have the environment, natural and built, working more together where things cut across. For the farming side, you can have it in natural environment, but also in communities and people, because farming has good communities. So we're looking at it now, so by the time it comes out to everyone, it will be formulated that bit more that you will see the crossovers. And that's what you're concerned about, is that's I'm reading you rightly. Yeah, that has been my concern. I don't want it in silos. I want people to be able to work together. Doesn't matter what group we're from, what belief we've got, but we can work and bring that into everything it is. So particularly for climate, it will almost go against every single one of them, because that does make a difference to every single part of what we're trying to do. So that will be out in the next few weeks. It's a very, very rough draft at the moment. As I said to Mr. Hawke earlier, there was 3 different fonts just on one page. So it is coming out and it's being formulated. We've had a meeting today and I've said a bit more as to how I would like it to be. And that is, I would like it to be able to have branches and that, you know, it flows out to all the other groups. So Mr. Hawke is going to have a word with some of the senior leadership team for theirs bits which cut across. So Mr. Brooke would be involved, Mr. Wagstaff, and Mr. Drew, can't think, Powell, Mr. Powell. So yeah, so we will all be working a bit more collaboratively with each other on it. So where we've all got a belief, you know, as you know, we can all go to whatever advisory group we want to, and we can all bring what we think we would like to see on it at that advisory group, whether you're a member of it officially or whether you're not. But come along and give your views as to, you think this section could be strengthened, but fundamentally what this document is about is for our group, our aims and objectives that we want to take forward for the next 4 years. So to start working on them, to start funding them and things like that. And that's what this document is going to be. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Viney,
and just to answer about the rivers, I was with councillors last week who have actually put in official papers, whatever, to the rivers of their area. So we could actually look, and I know at the Green Conference, because I saw some of that the other day, the Green Conference had a real thing on the rivers and pollution as well. So actually it might be worth pulling somebody else's work and then putting it for how it affects Southwest Water rivers, and they're, you know, disposing into our river system. So some of the initial work, you know, could be done for you by someone else. And then we personalise it to our place of West Devon.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Viney, do you want to say anything more about agriculture?
No, just to echo Mandy, there.
Yeah.
It's across the board, yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds like there'll be more emphasis on that, so that'll be good for those of us who are interested. Councillor Guthrie?
Just again to reiterate what Mandy is saying, the DART has been having quite a good long-running project on interacting with the Environment Agency and working right along the length of the DART, and going to look at that and see if we could mimic that and do a length of the team.
I swim in the Team, but the nearest river, basically. But often the Team is the nearest.
Yes, that's a particularly polluted area.
Okay. Mr. Brooke has reminded me that if we want to do extra work, we're welcome to attend hub meetings and read all of the reports that are sent to the hub. And we can also, you didn't say it quite like that, just to be fair. And we can ask questions at hub meetings as well. So there is plenty of work, extra work we can do if we want to.
As we all know, we can, be on Teams and not necessarily have to come to the hub meetings, but I chair those, don't I? So yes, anybody can speak at any time.
Okay, so is that the work programme done? Are we finished for the day? Thank you very much for your contribution. Good to see you all. I hope to see you soon.